Greetings, Zimbabwe, Africa, and the world. Welcome to In Conversation with Trevor, brought to you by Titan Law. I go beyond the headlines and beyond the sensational. Today, I'm in conversation with Briggs Bomba, who is the convener of the Zimbabwe Citizens Manifesto. Briggs Bomba, welcome to In Conversation with Trevor.
Thank you, Trevor.
Great pleasure having you here.
It's a real honor, and congratulations for the great success of your show.
Thank you. We appreciate that. I'm going to start by a quote of a statement that you made some time back, which I thought is profound. And it begins, "We remind all political actors that the majority of Zimbabwean citizens yearn for peace and progress and have an urgent demand on the leaders to show leadership at the socio-economic level to alleviate the economic suffering of Zimbabweans instead of the endless political bickering." What made you make that powerful statement?
Wow, thank you for reminding me of that. I made that statement on the occasion when we facilitated and hosted the former United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan's visit to Zimbabwe it was actually 10 days before the elections in 2018. And we were hosting what we called the National Citizens Convention. And in our view, Zimbabwe has reached the deepest depth of a crisis. If you go back to the 90s, you could have described our crisis as having been an economic crisis. You look at the demands, they were very economic in nature. People wanted salaries increased, taxes reduced, and such. In the 2000s, post the formation of the movement of democratic change, you could describe the crisis as political. It was a lot to do with civil liberties, the rights for people to organize, march, the fairness of the electoral process, and things like that. But because you've had these two crises unresolved for a very long time, they fester like a wound into a social crisis, which is where we are now. Mm-hmm. And a social crisis is what I describe as the deepest depth of a crisis, because it means you go beyond the economics, you go beyond the political. You are now talking about polarization. You are now talking about division. You are now talking about collapse of dreams. You are now talking about an inability to even believe and hope in a better future. You are now talking about individualism. You are now talking about atomization. You are talking about the ripping apart of the very social fabric of society. Those who listen to Thomas Mapfumo, in my view, this is what he meant when he said, "Nyika yenyu iya yamaichemera, ona yaita mamvemve." So you are talking about a fabric that's ripping apart into mamvemve, so to speak. So that's where we are. And the reason why we made that statement was to say, when you are at that level of a crisis as a country, the repository of solutions lies beyond the political parties. It lies beyond the matrix of political power struggle. In fact, you cannot come out of this situation if you are fixated with political power, because that can only serve the purpose of exacerbating the polarization, exacerbating the divisions.
And you talk of endless political bickering.
It exacerbates the bickering. So what we were saying was, we need to think beyond political power. We need to think at the level of where the citizens are. Where the citizens are very basic developmental and survival and livelihood questions.
And what
of
you're
life questions.
saying, Briggs, is that the political players are not addressing those issues that you've just highlighted now.
I think by definition, they are positioned more to think about the political power question. Whereas as citizens, we are saying, let's think about the people. You know, in the past, I'm sure you've heard phrases that says people-centered solutions. It means moving away from thinking about who should be our next leader to thinking about what future do we want as a country. What livelihoods do we want as citizens? What rights, what space, what voice? So we are suggesting a complete reframing or restructuring of how we are looking at the Zimbabwe political question or the Zimbabwe question, national question in general, to move from thinking about leaders to thinking about citizens, thinking about the people.
Take us through the process leading to the formation of the Citizens Manifesto.
It goes back to 2016. In 2016, if you remember, that was a time when we had an outbreak of social protests, if we are to put it that way. We had protests that were expressing themselves in the sense of what people did not want. So people were saying, we don't want bond notes, we don't want police on the streets, we don't want all of these things. And we started facilitating a conversation then that said it wasn't sufficient to talk about what we do not want. Our historical task as a generation was to actually define what we want and to talk about what we want. So we, facilitated these conversations, gathered by the end of 2016 in what we called the National People's Convention. And we asked that question, what do we want as a people? What do we want? Can we build a consensus on the future that we want as citizens? And
the future that, or perhaps before we get to the future that we want, who constitutes the Citizens Manifesto?
So the best way to look at it is that we just came out of a national citizens convention that was convened, co-convened with 23 civic formations in the country.
Do you mind naming some of them?
I can name some of them. It included groups like, your Zimbabwe National Students Union, your National Association of Youth Organizations. It included, groups like your Magamba Network, groups like your Zimbabwe Alliance, groups like, even your Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions, Zimbabwe Council of Churches, the VSET, which is the Vendor Initiative for Social and Economic Transformation, Bulawayo Vendors and Traders Association, Bulawayo Progressive Resident Associations. So you had a lot of your prominent and non-civil society formations, including women's groups like your Women's Academy, for Political Leadership and Excellence, Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development.
So this is a broad church.
It's a broad platform.
And you're convinced that it gives you a mandate to speak on behalf of the citizens.
We are convinced that it gives us a mandate to speak on behalf of the citizens, not because of the groups I have mentioned, but because of how the process since 2016 has evolved. It has evolved as a process that creates space for a completely unaffiliated citizens to show up and to have a voice.
Non-partisan.
Non-partisan, just coming from a community. So if you're in Mutoko, your youth initiatives for community development in Mutoko, these are all part of this process. These are people who are collectives that are active in their communities and they're advancing issues that add up to the collective vision of the future that we want as a country. So you have progressive citizens being a part of this process. When we met as the National Citizens Convention, you had business, person, prominent business people. I'm talking people like Nigel Chanakira, people like Shingi Munyeza, being in the process for the full 2 days and contributing very important inputs into this vision of the future that we want as citizens. You had the church represented. I'm talking people like Reverend Gele, Ecumenical Leadership Forum, being there and speaking again to this vision that we want. So I want to be very careful to say it's actually not about civil society organizations that you can have a name recognition about.
Okay.
It's really about citizens. The work that has happened since 2016 includes just going to communities where they don't have any civic organization, but they have issues that bring them together. And you engage on that level, and they were part of this process. You had teachers' unions, you had various formations. It's the largest convergence presently in the country of civic voices.
I was struck by your Zimbabwe social fabric, which was done by Gateway Zimbabwe, and the analysis of where we are, our national psyche. I walked away feeling depressed in terms of who we are at the present moment. Do you want to explain what you found out from that process?
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. So what we advancing on the Gateway Zim platform, I happen to serve as the strategic lead for that process, was to say let's not go for easy answers. I think those who have followed Amilcar Cabral, he has a famous saying where he says, "Tell no lies, claim no easy victories." So we are saying, can we take a systemic look at understanding where we are and how we got to where we are? And when you look at it from that perspective, you start to see that from the map that you saw, the biggest challenge that we have is a question of power that is unchecked and power that is abusive. So we've gotten the equation of citizens and leaders wrong. We've vested so much power into leadership and pretty much deprived the citizenry of power. And that creates conditions where that power can be abusive and it can be held without accountability.
When you say we, who are you referring to?
I'm referring to us as citizens at a certain level.
We've let this happen.
Because when you look at, where we are, a big part of it is the question of citizenship itself. How we understand citizenship and how we practice citizenship, particularly the question of citizen responsibility. So I'll give you an example. We have a very strange practice when you look at our electoral processes, where we vote on the basis of promises, not on the basis of a record. So all I need to do to be voted a councillor or a member of parliament in my constituency is to go to a print shop, print a gloss poster, make 30 promises that say I will, and I could be 55 years old, and people are going to vote for me on that. Take a nice photo and put it out there. The communities that are voting this way are communities where there are people with a record in terms of civic duty, responsibility, and service. There are people who are mentoring kids when they finish their O-levels and there's this long break before they start their A-levels. There are people who have a record of providing support when we need to patch our potholes.
So why are we not
There are
going for the people
with
without a record?
That, when we need to organize security in our neighborhood, when we need to do various things, so they are people with a record. But when it comes to the election, the political party will tell you that we have deployed so and so to be the candidate for council in this community, to be the candidate for an MP in this community. And these are people with no traceable records, so they come with promises. So I am saying it's a matter of citizen responsibility and duty to say, when we go out to vote next time, we are going to check your record and we are not going to listen to your promises, and we are going to vote for those who have a record of service and civic duty in our communities.
Well, what I've also found interesting in the map that you produced is the sense of woundedness, the sense of anger, the sense of powerlessness. Do you want to address those issues?
It's huge, because what happens is when you have a protracted economic crisis, as we have had in this country. I am old enough to remember the economic protests of the 90s. Those questions have never been decisively resolved. When you've had a political crisis as protracted and unresolved as you have had in this country, as I said earlier, it festers into a wound. That wound manifests in trauma. If you've had situations like we've had in this country, situations of conflict, including violent conflict, and we've never had space for people to address them, situations of, dehumanization in a sense, when you can't provide for your family, you can't attain your dreams, it manifests in trauma. And trauma has a way of creating that sense of resignation and hopelessness. Like you can't actually even dream about a better tomorrow. You can't even be hopeful. Look at our streets. If you just drive from here into the CBD, you'll find young people hanging at the back of those combis, and they'll ride from the CBD all the way to Chitungwizo. A few of them have fallen off and died, but there will be a next person ready to do that. You will not get young people in that behavior if they believed in a better tomorrow, if they were not in a traumatic space, or if they were not hopeless. So we are saying the impact, collective impact of us failing to resolve our political questions, us failing to resolve these economic questions, is untold trauma on the citizens.
Over 4 decades.
It stretches, at least 4 decades.
Yeah, sure. It goes back to UDI.
It goes even, before. And it's very important because we happen to have a very compacted sense of history in this country, which I think is unhealthy. If you speak to the Chinese, they will be telling you about General Cao 3,000 years ago and the voyages that they took. Yeah. So let's not be shy to make reference to what happened in the 70s, in the 60s, in the 50s, in the 40s, even in the late 1800s.
Colonization. Yes.
It's very much a part of our story today.
So we're 40 years old as a nation, independent nation, but we carry wounds that go back to the coming in of colonization.
And when we are, because look, the question always arises to say, how far back do you go when you are looking at resolving trauma, resolving historical wounds?
I want us to attend to that very important question later on. But now let's get into, so you've come up with the Citizens Manifesto, which is a very impressive document outlining the issues that you want to be addressed. Do you want to take us through what the manifesto has?
I'll give you, a sense. So, of course, the invitation was what vision of the future can, unite us? Do we want to aspire to? Do we want to work towards? The first, we came up with 13 cardinal pillars. The very first cardinal pillar of the Citizens Manifesto is servant leadership. And it speaks to everything that we have talked about now. We have gotten the question of leadership wrong in this country. And it manifests itself not just in terms of, government, the ruling party. It manifests across all of our society, including even in the civic
private
space.
sector too.
Even in private sector. So our leadership is very hierarchical, top down. If you are the leader, you are there to be served, instead of you being there to serve people. Leadership should be a responsibility that is held in trust to deliver certain value to the citizenry.
Okay, the next one?
The next cardinal pillar for us is active citizenship. We called it informed active citizenship. And what we were saying was that citizenship is not about showing up once every 5 years to vote. Citizenship is about everyone, it's about every day, and it's about everything that matters in our collective lives as citizens. So our trust there is to ensure that there is everyday direct participation in the affairs of our communities, in everything that matters in shaping the destiny of our country. So active citizenship, it's actually the most important for us, because we believe if we get that right, we are going to even impact the question of who we select, who we choose to be a leader at the end of the day.
So I'll go through. Some of these, the 13 include disabled persons' rights, peace, justice and reconciliation, democratic rights and freedoms, devolution of power, inclusive and diverse society, environmental sustainability, labor justice, priority investment in youth, gender justice, no corruption. These are fundamental issues.
They are very important, and of all the ones you talked about, I'll only speak to one, and this is this issue of national identity. We are in this place today where we go to parts of this country and they are referred to as Matebele land, Mashona land, Manyika land, and such. And we are saying we want to engender a future where there is a sense of oneness
and belonging
as a country. So we are actually advocating a process where we look at the campus and we say this is north, this is south, this is central, this is east. That's how we get to refer to ourselves, so that we move away from references or nomenclature that can exacerbate false lines of division.
Are you making progress on that particular issue?
Look, we are at a place today, it's been the toughest thing to get the citizen voice that is speaking outside the binary of either the ruling party and the opposition party to be heard. As we're talking, this process goes back to 2016. It has been so difficult to get the attention of some of the spaces that can, help amplify the voice. So we are very much appreciative that, we can have an opportunity like this to engage. But I think when we look at, because we're just coming from the second National Citizens Convention, we feel that there's a certain threshold of these issues going out there that has been reached. And we're quite, happy about that. Because I think the strength and resonance of these positions, when they are given space, it actually is obvious at a certain level. So we've not really met anyone who will say, look, servant leadership, that's just false.
So
it doesn't make sense.
Do the two political parties buy into the Citizens Manifesto? Are you getting support from them?
So coming out of the second National Citizens Convention, which was in September, just now, we wrote officially to, the movement of democratic change, requesting a meeting with, their president, Nelson Chamisa. We wrote to government requesting a meeting with President Mnangagwa. The good thing is that we have received responses from both. We have even had an opportunity for an engagement with Nelson Chamisa post the convention to speak to the citizens' positions. We have not yet had an opportunity to engage with President Mnangagwa, but we did receive a response that said, okay, we need more information. So we suspect there are processes that are underway, but we do expect that engagement, happens soon enough.
You've talked about our binary politics. There's a belief that you either belong in ZANU-PF or you belong in MDC. There's no space in between. Is it your sense that the majority of Zimbabweans, from the statement that we started with, are being drowned by radical extremist positions from both sides of the political aisle?
So we define ourselves as a non-partisan platform, but we don't call ourselves a non-political platform. And what we have said is that all of us, if you look at all of us who are involved in this citizens movement, come election time, we still go out to vote. And we're either voting ZANU-PF, we're voting MDC, or we're voting other options. But what we are pushing is, let's create space where we have a conversation that does not require you to flash out your political party card or to show up wearing the t-shirt of your political party. Let's talk about our well-being in our community, our, the civic space that we have, the opportunities that we have, the development questions in our community. Let's talk about those issues before, or in a way that does not require, you to tell me like, look, I'm ZANU-PF. Because there's a way that we can have this conversation in a manner that delivers value to all of us. So that's what's missing. Because when things become partisan, your party is always going to be right regardless. And the opposition is always going to be wrong regardless. And we don't find that to be necessarily helpful. We are saying, let's find space where we can have developmental conversations where all of us can derive value from.
Are you happy with that space, the creation of that space? Are you making progress there?
We have made progress. I would like to say that we have made progress. It's been a tough battle, but we have made progress.
Why do you think that is a tough battle for something that makes so much sense?
I have posed the question myself because I've met with media colleagues. We recently held a meeting with the editors, Zimbabwe Editors Forum. And I'm happy to say we had the majority of the editors from the mainstream media. And this is just like 2 weeks ago. So when I say we've reached a certain threshold of resonance, that's what I'm referring to.
Sure.
And even after that, there were some headlines that, did the rounds, but there were now headlines that were bringing the civic voice. Because our thrust all along has been to say, can we bring in the civic voice to help inform the thinking about the solutions that will move us out of the crisis that we are in as a nation?
And you, coming out of your second national convention, you were calling for, putting the citizens first, the Constitution of Zimbabwe first. And your hashtag was "It's us and it's now," a sense of agency. Do you think you're making progress as far as that is concerned, putting the citizens first, the country first, the Constitution first?
Yeah, exactly. So we called it citizens, country, and Constitution. Whatever we do, whatever disagreements we have as a nation, they should never compromise citizens, they should never compromise the country, our interest as a country, and they should never compromise the Constitution that we have as a country. So this question about putting citizens first, it's something that I'd really like to speak to.
Sure.
Because we came out of this process and we asked ourselves, one of the questions that we asked ourselves was to say, how do we place citizens at the center of politics and governance in this country? And the way that question is getting answered now, as I'm speaking to you and through the work that we are doing, is to say it starts at the community level. Let's go back to the community and let's ensure that at the community level, at the most local level, citizens have a voice, citizens have power to decide what happens at that level. So we have already started processes to develop what we are calling a new charter on participatory governance, because we are saying whatever happens at the community level, citizens must be consulted. And don't consult us by artificially putting an advert in a newspaper that says we are going to sell this piece of land that no one reads. The same way that water bills are delivered to our households individually. Deliver a notice, call us to a meeting, tell us that this piece of public land that had been reserved in the master plan as land where we'll build a road or a public school, we are now going to turn it into cluster homes, or we are now going to give it to Mr. So-and-so to build a hotel. And these are the benefits, and have the citizens vote on that, say yes or no.
You Briggs, you are trying to re-engineer us as a society into thinking of ourselves as citizens and not subjects.
Precisely.
But since colonialism, UDI and our liberation struggle and so forth, we have been treated like subjects and not citizens. That's going to be a huge task for you.
It's a massive mission, but we have reached a point because we are at this depth of crisis. The same quote that you brought earlier on, in that same speech, I talk about a fundamental battle that is underway to define the future of this country and the pathways that we take. So we think that there is no better time than now to do that re-engineering because we have reached rock bottom. We have tried all of these and they have not worked. Just look at, our conditions, our situation, what we are dealing with. So there is no better time than now. And we are so convinced that if we start from the bottom going up, that is going to be the durable solution for the challenges that we are facing as a country. Our solutions are not going to come from the top coming down. The liberation struggle, if you look at it, is a solution that came from the top coming down, because by necessity it had to be a top-down process. It was a military process, it was commandist, it was top-down, and you need, if you're fighting an armed struggle, you actually need that. But we are in a different era since 1980, where the issues really have to be defined from the bottom up. They have to be more about the space that citizens have, the responsibility that citizens have, the agents that citizens have, the power that citizens have, the voice that citizens have. So that's where we are pushing this conversation to. And I'm happy to say there are positive results in terms, because we are working.
Do you want to outline some of those positive results?
I'll give you a very practical example. One of the spaces that we have been involved in terms of helping to actualize the citizen voice issue is Acturas. Just took Acturas mine. This is a gold mine that has operated since 1917. It has made billions of dollars. If you go there right now, it's as if that's Chernobyl, like a nuclear bomb blew out there. It's desolation, it's destitution, it's desperation. There's nothing that is happening there. And we're asking ourselves, what happened to the billions of dollars that were created in terms of value from this space? And the citizens themselves, before we went in, they were all individualized. So we came in at one point when they were actually being evicted from the mines and everyone was being told to go back home. Yet they were being owed years of salaries, years of benefits and things like that. So the processes of helping them to come together as a community, to start to meet regularly and to start to analyze collectively, like what are the issues that are affecting us and what can we act on, has built their voice and their power. So they've been able to actually deal with so many issues that affect their community, whether it's things to do with community health, things to do with safety and security in their community, things to do with opportunities, economic opportunities. You know, they have been able to become a collective and to act together, and you know, they have agents now. So when you test the concept, it actually pans out. It, you know, it works out. And for us, we are saying the conversation has even gone beyond, because they are now asking very critical questions that say, why didn't we start to set aside 0.005% of the profits that were being made since 1917 into a social protection fund of sorts, so that when the mine stops operating, people don't become destitute. So it moves from organizing citizens to impacting policy options. And this is why we want to engage political actors, engage government to say, look, there are all these insights that are coming from the experience on the ground that can help inform the direction that we take.
There's a sense of agency to the work that you are doing, although at some point one thinks, you know, are you running out of time or what? And I'm going to go again and quote one of the statements that you said, which was that it is the love for the country that motivates us to take a stand today. We fear that if the government fails to act with necessary agency, those who will come after us may be faceless. And that point may be too late for the country. And you said this on the 14th of January this year. And we know what has happened since then. I go to this quote because I look at the festering, the hate, the woundedness, the young emergency taxi people that you talk about. And one gets the sense that we're in a fragile environment. We're in an explosive environment. And yet the project that we embarked on is a long-term one. What's your response to that?
So what we have called for is an inclusive national dialogue as a matter of urgency. If you look at our situation, whether it's the situation in the health sector, you know, right now doctors are on strike. Just today, the senior doctors have also gone on strike. You don't want to even think about what's happening at Pari and all these places. The situation in our education sector, the situation with regards to just affording the basics in terms of prices. You know, the way that prices have shot up more than 600% and salaries have largely stayed the same. So in that same statement, we were calling for the government to declare a state of economic emergency and to move beyond that and to commence a process of an inclusive national dialogue where we all come together as citizens. The government, the opposition, civil society, we need a bigger framework. It can be done through the tripartite framework. You know, pensioners have to be part of this conversation. Informal, unemployed
This is a nation
people,
building project.
Yeah, have to be part of this conversation. So we are saying, as a matter of urgency, let's create a platform that enables all of us to come together and say, look, where we are is not working, but within us or amongst us together, we are a repository of solutions. We can fix this together.
Are the conditions conducive for that?
The challenge we are facing is the fixation on political power. And this is why we think that the citizen voice speaking outside of that matrix has to be amplified. And the other thing that I would say is that there is a huge responsibility on our political leadership, both in terms of opposition political leadership and in terms of the current government, to really accept the fact that only an inclusive national dialogue process that is sincere will take us out of where we are. And I would go further and say there is a bigger responsibility on the part of government and the ruling party, because they are the ones who are holding the power. They are the ones who are holding the leverage. And they are also the ones who have to make the most in terms of concessions around the reforms that have to happen, the change that needs to happen. So there is a bigger responsibility on the current government and the ruling party to meet everyone somewhere that can enable this inclusive national dialogue process to take place.
Are you hopeful that's going to happen before 2023?
I'm an incurable optimist. I don't think that if things remain the way they are, we will have a good 2023 to talk about. People are wondering right now about Christmas, which is a month away, whether they will have a Christmas. So my hope is that the different processes that we are engaged in, we spoke earlier on with about the elders when we, helped facilitate their visit and their intervention. They came, they met Edie, they met Nelson. Recently, they were also again here, Gracia Michelle, Mary Robinson, the engagements are happening. And we hope that even other actors in the region, in particular South Africa, we have a meeting scheduled with South Africans and other guys to say, can we all bring sense to this conversation, to say an inclusive national dialogue has to happen as a matter of urgency.
You say you are an incurable optimist. What frightens you most about this country? What frightens you most about where we are right now?
You see, it's at one level is the normalization of the abnormal. And when I move around the continent, I actually talk of Zimbabwe as being an abnormal. Most of Africa is a normalized abnormal. So look at South Africa, 50% of young people don't have jobs. Look at Kenya, only 6% of the working people are in the formal economy. So you have issues across the continent, and it's important even for us as Zimbabweans to keep that broader context so that we don't just become fixated on each other. But for us, whereas this is a normalized abnormal, ours is an abnormal where you don't have fuel for almost a year. I think it's more than a year now. You don't have cash for more than a year. You have this runaway inflation. So this is an abnormal situation. And my fear is the normalization of that abnormal
which
situation.
We have done.
Indifference.
Which we have done over
to
decades.
That. The indifference, that we will be indifferent to this situation. We will not feel the sense of urgency. We will not feel like, look, honestly, let's stop bluffing. Let's get going with the necessary work that needs to be done. That is, that is my fear.
What is the one thing that gives you hope about this nation?
People love this country. So in the same map that you looked at, the one that we did, through Gateway Zimbabwe, one of the things that stands out is that Zimbabweans love their country. We love our country. And that's really something that, gives us capital to build from. So, I hold that dearly, and I remain very hopeful that if we build the citizen's voice, if it's amplified, if it's given space, if it speaks to the solutions that are needed in terms of the future that we want as a people, we will see a better Zimbabwe for all.
So you say we love this country, but do we understand our responsibilities as citizens to the country, not to our political parties? Do we understand that?
That's the work that we are doing, is to build that understanding, to say it actually starts with citizens' responsibility. Electoral processes in this country rarely produce the ideal results. In most cases, they elevate, I'm sorry to say this, but it's the truth, they elevate mediocrity even to the point of sanctity. That's what happens through electoral processes. If you go back to the Athenian notion of democracy, you know, people were voted through a lottery system. You put your names in a hat, those who were willing to serve, and they picked names from a hat. It produced better results because you didn't have to fight through the certain thuggery that's needed for you to even become a candidate of a major political party. The way you need to use money and all of this, so you know, it eliminated that selection that has to happen before the election.
But that's the politics we've normalized of the thuggery, and I like the expression that you use, normalizing mediocrity. That's the politics that we've...
So we are saying the answer now lies with what we've put out as the second cardinal pillar of the Citizens Manifesto: active citizenship. When we go out to vote next time, and let's make this, if it's 2023, vote for a record. Don't vote for a promise.
Is there a book that you'd recommend to citizens out there on the issues that we've discussed, the citizens' empowerment and so forth?
So first of all, I would recommend people to familiarize themselves with the Citizens Manifesto itself. It's online, www.citizensmanifesto.net. People can find it there. I will, from the top of my head, I'm going to give you a reference to The Future of Capitalism by Paul Collier.
I'm reading that book right now.
It's an amazing text for our time because it speaks again to going back to community, going back to community as the answer and finding solutions from the bottom up. Even if from a business perspective, it speaks to an ethical corporation. What does an ethical corporation and ethical approach to business looks like? It speaks to a responsible government. So I would give reference to that.
Fantastic. Briggs Bomba, you are engaged in a hugely transformative project for the nation. And we wish you all the very best in making Zimbabweans realize their responsibilities to this nation as citizens. And we wish you the best in a very, very tough assignment, a noble one in a very polarized environment. So we're grateful for you coming on to In Conversation.
Thank you, Trevor. The only thing I can say is it's us and it's now, country, constitution, citizens.
On that hopeful note, thank you, Briggs, for coming on to In Conversation. And for you who are watching us from Zimbabwe, across the continent, and the diaspora, thank you for watching. We invite you to visit our YouTube channel, and on that channel you'll find a red note that says subscribe. Press onto that button and subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you don't miss out on these amazing conversations. Thank you for watching In Conversation with Trevor. See you next time. Bye.